The old Ford pickup looked as though it had already traveled every back road in Texas. Its blue paint had faded beneath years of sun. One side of the hood was slightly raised, the rear bumper leaned lower than it should, and a thin layer of red dust covered the tires. It rattled softly as it moved along the private road toward Braddock Ranch, passing endless stretches of dry grass, black cattle, weathered fences, and live oak trees twisted by decades of wind. Behind the wheel sat Marcus Bennett. He wore a plain denim shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, brown work pants, worn leather boots, and a dark cowboy hat that had lost its original shape years ago. His beard was trimmed, but streaked with gray. His hands were strong, scarred, and steady on the wheel. Nothing about him suggested that he had spent the previous afternoon signing documents worth more than $180 million. Nothing about him suggested that every fence, barn, pasture, herd, well, and road he could see now belonged to him. And Marcus preferred it that way. He slowed as the main gate came into view. A black iron arch stood over the road with the words Braddock Ranch welded into the metal. Beneath it, a smaller brass sign read, Established 1912. Marcus stared at those numbers for several seconds. His father had first crossed that gate in 1974, not through the front entrance, through a narrow service gate half a mile east. Marcus still remembered the story. His father, Elijah Bennett, had been 19 years old then, strong enough to carry 2 feed sacks at once, quiet enough to endure insults without responding, desperate enough to accept almost any work that paid honestly. He had spent 7 years at Braddock Ranch. 7 years repairing fences, calming horses, sleeping in a small bunkhouse with a leaking roof, and watching other men receive promotions he had earned. Elijah rarely spoke about the humiliation, but Marcus had seen it in his eyes whenever the old man talked about the ranch. He had also seen something else: pride. Because no matter how badly some men had treated him, Elijah had loved the land. He loved the smell of rain on dry soil. He loved the sound of cattle before sunrise. He loved the quiet hour between darkness and daylight, when the whole ranch seemed to hold its breath. Marcus had learned to love those things through his father's memories. Now, nearly 50 years later, the ranch belonged to Elijah Bennett's son. Marcus drove beneath the iron arch. A guard booth stood several yards ahead. A young man in mirrored sunglasses leaned out the window and raised one hand. Marcus stopped. The guard looked first at the truck, then at Marcus. Deliveries use the east gate. Marcus rested one arm against the open window. I'm not making a delivery. The guard glanced toward the cardboard box on the passenger seat. Inside were several folders, an old photograph, a thermos, and a pair of leather gloves that had belonged to Marcus's father. You here for maintenance? No. Looking for work? Marcus studied the young man's face. There was no open hostility in it, only assumption. I have a meeting at the main house. The guard gave a short laugh. With who? Harold Braddock. That changed his expression for half a second. Then suspicion returned. You have an appointment. Yes. What name? Marcus Bennett. The guard turned toward a clipboard inside the booth. He ran one finger down a printed page, stopped, then checked it again. I don't see you. Marcus knew exactly why. The acquisition had been kept confidential. Only Harold Braddock, 2 attorneys, the bank's senior representative, and members of the investment group knew the buyer's identity. Even the ranch management team had been told only that the property was being sold. Marcus could have pulled out his phone. He could have called Harold. He could have ended the misunderstanding in less than 30 seconds. But he had not come early by accident. The official meeting was scheduled for noon. It was only 8:15. Marcus wanted to see the Yaquault ranch before the lawyers, investors, executives, and polished introductions arrived. He wanted to know what kind of place he had purchased. More importantly, he wanted to know what kind of men were running it. "Call the main house," Marcus said calmly. "Ask for Mr. Braddock." The guard shifted in his chair. "Mr. Braddock doesn't take calls from the gate." "He'll take this one." The young man's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, the sound of another truck approached from behind. A large white pickup rolled to a stop. Its door opened, and a broad man in his late 50s stepped out. He wore expensive boots, a silver belt buckle, a tan hat, and a plaid shirt stretched tightly across his stomach. His name was Wade Cooper. For 28 years, Wade had worked at Braddock Ranch. He had begun as a cattle hand. He had become crew supervisor, then operations manager, and finally, ranch foreman. For the past decade, Wade had carried himself as though Harold Braddock had already handed him the deed. Workers lowered their voices when he approached. Suppliers returned his calls immediately. Local businessmen invited him to private tables. And Wade had begun to believe that authority and ownership were the same thing. He walked toward the guard booth with an annoyed expression. "What's the holdup?" The guard pointed toward Marcus's truck. "Says he has a meeting with Mr. Braddock." Wade looked through the open window. His eyes moved slowly over Marcus's shirt, hat, truck, and weathered boots. Then they settled on Marcus's face. "You looking for day work?" Marcus turned toward him. "No. Contract crew's full." "I didn't ask about a crew." Wade planted one hand on the door of the Ford. "You're blocking the entrance." "I was waiting for him to call the main house." Wade looked at the guard. "You call anybody?" "No, sir." "Good." He turned back to Marcus. "If you're selling something, take it to procurement, east entrance." "I'm not selling anything." "Then what exactly are you doing here?" Marcus could hear cattle moving in a distant pen. Somewhere behind the barns, metal clanged against metal. A horse gave a sharp, impatient snort. He spoke without raising his voice. "I told him, I have business with Harold Braddock." Wade's mouth curved into a humorless smile. "Men who have business with Mr. Braddock usually don't show up unannounced in a truck that's leaking oil." Marcus glanced briefly toward the ground. There was no oil beneath the Ford. Wade had not even looked. It was not an observation. It was an insult designed to remind Marcus where Wade believed he belonged. Marcus looked back at him. "Then call him." For the first time, Wade's expression hardened completely. Behind him, two ranch workers had stopped near a utility vehicle. They pretended to check equipment while watching the confrontation. Wade leaned closer to the open window. "Let me explain how this works. Mr. Braddock has investors coming today. Bankers, attorneys, people who have real business on this property. I'm not calling the main house every time somebody drives in, asking for him." Marcus said nothing. Wade continued. "Turn around. Take the east road and use the workers' gate. Somebody there can tell you whether we need extra hands." The guard looked down, hiding a smile. One of the workers near the utility vehicle laughed under his breath. Marcus felt something old move through him. Not surprise, not even anger. Recognition. He had heard those words before, not personally, but in his father's voice. "They told me the front road wasn't for men like us," Elijah had once said. "So I used the back gate for 7 years, even after I was trusted with every animal on the property. Marcus looked beyond Wade toward the enormous ranch house on the hill. White columns, wide balconies, tall windows catching the morning light. He had spent half his life building businesses that allowed goods, food, and equipment to move across the country. He had negotiated with governors, banks, union leaders, military contractors, and international investors. Yet standing before him was a man who believed an old truck had told him everything he needed to know. Marcus shifted the Ford into gear. Wade stepped back with a satisfied expression. But before Marcus drove away, he said quietly, "What's your name?" Wade gave a small laugh. "Wade Cooper. I run this ranch." Marcus nodded once. "I'll remember that." Then he turned the truck around. The guard raised the gate without looking at him. As Marcus drove away from the main entrance, Wade watched through the dust. One of the workers approached. "You think he really knew Mr. Braddock?" Wade looked at him sharply. "You think Harold Braddock has meetings with every drifter who says his name?" The worker shook his head. Wade adjusted his belt. "Exactly." He returned to his truck and drove toward the ranch house, already forgetting Marcus Bennett. Marcus followed the east road. It curved past equipment sheds, fertilizer tanks, rusted machinery, and 2 long bunkhouses. The farther he traveled from the main gate, the more the ranch changed. The decorative fences disappeared. The road narrowed. The clean white buildings near the main house gave way to aging structures with patched roofs and peeling paint. At the workers' entrance, there was no iron arch. Only a chain-link gate hanging slightly crooked between 2 wooden posts. A faded sign read, "Employees, Deliveries, Livestock." Marcus parked beside a row of dusty vehicles. For a moment, he remained behind the wheel. He could call Harold now. The old man would send a driver. Wade would be ordered to apologize. The workers would straighten their backs and change their voices. But Marcus had not purchased Braddock Ranch merely for its acreage. He had purchased a living operation. 600 employees and contractors depended on it. Dozens of small ranches sold cattle through its network. Families occupied company housing. Communities relied on its contracts. Marcus needed to understand what existed beneath the polished surface. And in less than 10 minutes, Wade Cooper had shown him where to look. Marcus took the cardboard box from the passenger seat and stepped out. Heat was already rising from the earth. Several men stood near a loading platform, drinking coffee from paper cups. They watched Marcus approach. A tall worker with a blond beard called out, "You here for the fencing crew?" "No." "Kitchen?" Marcus shook his head. Another man looked toward the box. "Office supplies go around the side." "I'm trying to reach the main house." That brought several smiles. One of the men whistled softly. "Long walk from here." "Can I get there through the property?" The blond worker pointed with his cup. "Service road past the horse barn, but Cooper catches you wandering around, he'll have your head." "He already sent me here." That caused laughter. Not cruel laughter this time. The tired amusement of men who knew Wade Cooper well. "Then you met the king," one of them said. A young ranch hand standing slightly apart from the others did not laugh. He was around 25, lean, dark-haired, and sunburned across the nose. His name was Jacob Reed. He had worked at Braddock Ranch for only 4 months, long enough to understand the hierarchy, not long enough to stop being bothered by it. Jacob noticed the box in Marcus's hands and the slight stiffness in his right leg. "Need help carrying that?" Marcus looked at him. "I've got it." "You sure?" "I'm I'm sure. Jacob nodded. Then, after hesitating, he held out a sealed bottle of water from a cooler. It's a long way to the office. Marcus accepted it. Thank you. One of the older workers smirked. Careful, Jacob. Cooper sees you handing out company water. He'll deduct it from your check. The men laughed again. Jacob did not. That happened? The question came from Marcus. The older worker's smile faded. He looked toward the equipment shed before answering. Wouldn't surprise me. The others became quiet. Marcus opened the bottle. What does get deducted from your checks? No one answered immediately. Then the blonde worker shrugged. Housing, equipment, damaged tools, late fees. Late fees? For being late to shift? How late? Depends who's asking. The heavy man near the platform frowned. Come on, Ray. What? He asked. The heavy man lowered his voice. He could be from the state. Ray looked Marcus over. In that truck? Marcus drank slowly. The comment did not offend him. It told him how thoroughly appearance controlled life on the ranch. Jacob stepped closer. You really have a meeting? Yes. With Mr. Braddock? Yes. Jacob looked toward the distant hill. I can take you to the administration office. Ray raised both eyebrows. You planning to lose your job before lunch? I'm taking him to the office, not burning down a barn. The foreman sent him here. Jacob looked at Marcus. Did he tell you not to go to the office? No. He told me to use the workers' entrance. Jacob nodded. Then you used it. Marcus almost smiled. Lead the way. They crossed the yard together. As they walked, Marcus studied everything. A tractor sat with one wheel removed, supported by blocks of wood instead of proper stands. Electrical wires hung from an open junction box. 2 workers loaded feed without gloves or protective masks. Near the cattle pens, a metal gate had been secured with rope where a hinge had broken. The ranch generated tens of millions of dollars each year. Yet its workers were using equipment that looked one mistake away from killing someone. Marcus pointed toward the tractor. How long has that been sitting there? Jacob glanced at it. 3 weeks. Why? Replacement assembly hasn't been approved. Who approves it? Mr. Cooper. Marcus kept walking. A horse barn appeared ahead. The building itself was beautiful from a distance, but closer inspection revealed cracked boards, loose roofing, and drainage problems. Inside one of the stalls, a chestnut mare kicked anxiously against the wall. Marcus stopped. The horse's breathing was fast. One front leg trembled. Jacob looked toward the animal. That's Rosie. What happened? Cut her leg 2 days ago. Has a veterinarian seen her? Jacob hesitated. Not yet. Marcus turned to him. Why not? Wade said the vet would be here Friday. It's Monday. I know. Marcus set the cardboard box down and approached the stall. The mare pulled back when he reached for the latch. He spoke softly. Easy. Easy, girl. Jacob watched as Marcus entered. His movements changed around the horse. He became slower. Gentler. He turned slightly rather than facing her directly. He let her smell his hand before touching her neck. Within seconds, the mare's breathing began to settle. Marcus crouched beside the injured leg. The cut was swollen and warm. This can't wait until Friday. Jacob lowered his voice. I told the supervisor. What did he say? That she's not breeding stock. Marcus looked up. So she's not worth the bill? Jacob's silence answered him. Marcus stood and removed his phone. He called a number. A woman answered after 2 rings. Dr. Lawson. This is Marcus Bennett. There was a pause. Mr. Bennett, I wasn't expecting to hear from you before the meeting. I'm at the East Horse Barn. There's a chestnut mare with an infected leg wound. How soon can you get here? Braddock Ranch. Yes. 40 minutes. Come through the workers' entrance. Jacob stared at him. Marcus ended the call. You know Dr. Lawson? I met her last week. Jacob looked confused. Last week? Before Marcus could answer, a voice thundered from the barn entrance. What the hell are you doing? Wade Cooper strode toward them. 2 supervisors followed close behind. His face had turned red. Marcus remained beside the stall, looking at an injured horse. I told you to report to the labor office. No, you told me to use the workers' entrance. Wade stopped several feet away. You think this is funny? No. You're trespassing in a restricted area. Jacob stepped forward. I brought him through. Wade turned on him. I wasn't asking you. He said he had a meeting. And you believed him? Jacob looked toward Marcus, then back at Wade. I thought someone should check. Wade moved closer. Go back to your crew. Jacob did not move. Now. Jacob's shoulders tightened. Marcus noticed fear in the young man's eyes. Not fear of physical violence. Fear of losing the income that paid for rent, food, and perhaps more. Marcus picked up his box. Go ahead, Jacob. Jacob hesitated. Then he nodded and left the barn. Wade watched him go. You've got a talent for causing trouble. Marcus faced him. I called a veterinarian for the mare. For a moment, Wade appeared not to understand. Then his eyes widened. You called who? Dr. Emily Lawson. That horse is under my management. That horse is infected. The vet comes Friday. She comes in 40 minutes. Wade stepped so close that Marcus could smell coffee on his breath. You don't make decisions on my ranch. Marcus held his gaze. Your ranch? Wade's nostrils flared. You know what I mean. I'm beginning to. One of the supervisors shifted uncomfortably. Wade pointed toward the door. You're leaving. I have a meeting at noon. You won't be here at noon. I will. Security's on the way. Marcus glanced toward his watch. It was 9:12. He still had nearly 3 hours before the formal announcement. Then I suppose I'll meet them. Wade stared at him, perhaps expecting anger, fear, or retreat. Marcus offered none. That calmness made Wade angrier. You people come out here thinking you can walk wherever you want, demand whatever you want, and call anybody you want. The barn became very still. Even the supervisors looked at Wade. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. You people? Wade seemed to recognize the danger in his own words. He shifted. People who don't work here. Marcus stepped closer. Then say that. Wade looked away first. A security vehicle arrived outside. The same young guard from the main entrance stepped out with an older officer. Wade pointed at Marcus. Escort him off the property. The older officer looked at Marcus. Sir, are you refusing to leave? Marcus spoke evenly. I was invited here by Harold Braddock. Wade shook his head. He keeps saying that. The officer held out one hand. Do you have written confirmation? Marcus did. Inside the top folder was the signed purchase agreement. Inside his phone were messages from Harold and the attorneys. He could have ended everything. Instead, Marcus looked toward Wade. I'm scheduled to meet Mr. Braddock at noon. The officer checked his watch. It's after 9. I arrived early. Why? To see the ranch. Wade laughed. You've seen it. Now go. Marcus picked up the box. I'll wait outside the main office. No, you won't. The older officer sighed. Sir, I'm going to ask you to leave voluntarily. Marcus studied him. The officer did not seem cruel, only cautious. He had been given an order by the man everyone believed controlled the ranch. Marcus nodded. I'll wait at the workers' gate. Wade folded his arms. You'll wait on the county road. Marcus walked out of the barn. As he passed Wade, he said quietly, You should have called Harold. Wade answered without looking at him, You should have known your place. Marcus stopped. The words struck deeper than Wade could have known. Elijah Bennett had heard them many times. Know your place, at the feed store, at the cattle auction, at restaurants where his money was accepted but his presence was not. At Braddock Ranch, where he had trained younger white men who later became his supervisors. Marcus turned slowly. My father knew this place. Wade looked confused. What? He worked here? That's supposed to mean something? It means I know exactly what kind of place this used to be. Marcus looked around the barn, and I'm starting to understand what it became. Then he walked away. Wade watched him go with a strange uneasiness he could not explain. Marcus returned to the workers' yard. By then, word of the confrontation had spread. The men who had laughed earlier avoided his eyes. Jacob stood near a stack of fencing posts. When Marcus approached, Jacob stepped away from the crew. I'm sorry. For what? I should have called the office before taking you through. You did nothing wrong. Wade's going to write me up. For helping a visitor? He'll call it abandoning my station. Marcus placed the box in the back of his truck. How many write-ups before you're fired? 3. How many do you have? 2. Marcus looked at him. For what? Jacob rubbed the back of his neck. First one was for refusing to use a horse with a swollen hoof. Second was for leaving work early. Why did you leave? My little sister had a seizure at school. Marcus's expression changed. She all right? Mostly. She has epilepsy. And Wade wrote you up? He said I should have found someone to cover. Marcus looked toward the ranch house in the distance. The white building shone in the sunlight. Clean, impressive, respectable. From the hill, no investor could see the damaged equipment, untreated animals, frightened employees, or deductions hidden in payroll checks. That was how broken systems survived. They polished the front gate, and they forced the truth to enter from the back. Marcus leaned against the truck. Do you like working here? Jacob looked surprised. I like ranching. That wasn't my question. Jacob glanced toward the other men. My grandfather worked cattle. My dad too. This is what I know. You can know something and still deserve better from it. Jacob looked at him more carefully. You really aren't here for a job, are you? No. Who are you? Before Marcus could answer, a dark SUV entered through the east gate. Dr. Emily Lawson stepped out carrying a medical case. She was in her 40s, with auburn hair tied beneath a cap and dust already covering her boots. Marcus? The workers turned. Marcus walked toward her. The mare's in the east barn. Emily looked around. Why are you out here? Long story. Wade's truck appeared moments later. He stopped hard beside the barn and jumped out. What is she doing here? Emily raised one eyebrow. Nice to see you too. Wade, I didn't authorize a visit. You don't have to. The owner called me. Silence. Wade's eyes shifted toward Marcus. Marcus said nothing. Wade gave a strained laugh. Harold didn't call you. No? Emily adjusted the strap of her bag. Marcus did. And since when does a stranger have authority to call a veterinarian onto this property? Emily looked at Marcus, then back at Wade. The acquisition agreement included confidentiality terms. She had been hired as part of Marcus's transition team, but she was not permitted to disclose the purchase before the formal announcement. She chose her words carefully. Since he agreed to pay the bill, Wade's confidence returned. Then treat the horse and send the invoice to him, not the ranch. That's exactly what he asked. Marcus looked at Wade. Problem solved. Wade stepped toward him. You're still leaving? Emily frowned. Is something going on? Marcus answered. Apparently, I don't belong at the front of the property. Wade's face tightened. That's not what I said. Marcus held his eyes. No. You were very careful about what you said. Several workers were watching now. Wade realized he was losing control of the scene. He pointed toward Jacob. You, back to work. Jacob looked toward Marcus. Marcus gave him a small nod. Jacob returned to the fencing crew. Wade then addressed the others. Anybody standing around when I come back loses an hour. The workers scattered. Marcus watched them. You deduct an hour for 5 minutes? I manage productivity. No, you manage fear. Wade stepped close again. You don't know anything about this operation? I know more than I did an hour ago. Marcus climbed into his pickup. Wade placed one hand on the open door. County Road, now. Marcus looked down at Wade's hand. The foreman removed it. Marcus started the engine. Then he drove toward the workers' gate. But he did not leave the property. Instead, he parked beside the narrow fence line, still technically inside the ranch. He lowered the tailgate, sat on it, opened his thermos, and poured coffee into the metal lid. Wade arrived 3 minutes later. He stopped his truck and stared. Marcus raised the cup slightly. The county road starts on the other side of that cattle guard. Wade's jaw tightened. You think you're clever? No. You waiting for somebody to rescue you? I'm waiting for noon. Wade looked toward the guard. Make sure he stays here. Then he drove away. For the next hour, Marcus sat beside the old Ford. He watched livestock trucks enter. He watched employees clock in. He watched supervisors inspect certain vehicles but wave others through. He spoke to no one unless they spoke first. And slowly, people did. An older woman from the kitchen brought him a breakfast taco wrapped in foil. You look hungry. Marcus accepted it. How much? She shook her head. Wade charges enough for everything already. Her name was Rosa Delgado. She had worked at Braddock Ranch for 16 years. Marcus asked about the kitchen. She told him the staff had been cut from 11 workers to 7, while meal production had increased. She told him Wade's cousin had been given the food supply contract. She told him invoices were high, but deliveries were often short. Does Mr. Braddock know? Rosa looked toward the distant house. Mr. Braddock hasn't walked through our kitchen in 5 years. A mechanic named Curtis stopped beside the truck. He had heard Marcus called a veterinarian for Rosie. Curtis told him several work vehicles had failed safety inspections. Wade signs them anyway. Why? New equipment costs money, and Wade gets a bonus for staying under budget. A middle-aged ranch hand named Samuel said his wages had been docked after a bull damaged a gate. Were you responsible? No. Hinge was rusted through. I reported it twice. Do you have copies? Samuel gave a bitter smile. Reports disappear around here. Every conversation lasted only a few minutes. Every story added another crack to the image Marcus had purchased. At 10:30, a black sedan approached the workers' gate. Inside was Elaine Porter, senior counsel for Bennett Agricultural Holdings. She had represented Marcus for almost 9 years. Elaine was elegant, precise, and rarely surprised. But when she saw Marcus sitting on the tailgate outside the workers' entrance, eating a breakfast taco, she removed her sunglasses slowly. The driver stopped. Elaine stepped out. Marcus. Morning. Why are you sitting here? I was asked to leave the main property. Her face became still. By whom? Wade Cooper. The foreman? He told me to know my place. Elaine looked toward the guard booth. The young guard suddenly became very interested in paperwork. Do you want me to contact Harold? Not yet. Marcus, I'm learning. Elaine had seen that expression before. Years earlier, Marcus had visited a distribution center after reports of wage theft. He had entered without an executive escort and spent a full shift loading trucks. 3 managers had been dismissed the following week. 2 were later charged with fraud. Elaine lowered her voice. What have you found? Unsafe equipment, payroll deductions, deferred animal care, possible contract manipulation, possible theft. In 2 hours. In 1 gate. Elaine looked toward the ranch. The financial audit already showed irregularities. How irregular? We were going to discuss it before the meeting. Discuss it now. She opened the rear door of the sedan and removed a thin folder. Marcus took it. Inside were expense summaries, livestock records, supplier contracts, and payroll comparisons. Elaine pointed to several highlighted entries. Feed expenses increased 22% over 3 years, even though herd size fell 8%. Supplier? Cooper Agricultural Services. Marcus looked up. Wade's company? His brothers. What else? Equipment maintenance charges were paid to 3 separate vendors registered to the same address. Connected to Wade? We don't know yet. Marcus turned a page. Missing cattle? Possibly. Inventory records and sales records don't match. How many? At least 300 head over 4 years. Marcus looked toward the ranch road. At current prices, the missing cattle represented hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that was only what the preliminary audit had revealed. Elaine lowered her voice. There's another issue. What? Harold's health. Marcus closed the folder. He told me the cancer was stable. It may not be. His attorney called this morning. Harold insisted the meeting proceed, but he spent last night at a hospital in Fort Worth. Marcus stared toward the main house. Is he there now? He arrived 20 minutes ago. Marcus stood. Why didn't anyone tell me? He asked us not to. Marcus placed the audit folder inside the box. His anger toward Wade shifted temporarily into concern. Harold Braddock was not a close friend. Their relationship had begun as a negotiation. But over 6 months, Marcus had come to respect the old rancher. Harold could be stubborn, proud, and blind to the failures beneath him. Yet he had also refused higher offers from developers who intended to divide the ranch into luxury communities. He had chosen Marcus because Marcus promised to preserve the land, and because Marcus had told him about Elijah. Elaine looked toward the ford. "You should come with me." Marcus shook his head. "I'll drive." She glanced at the truck. "Through the main entrance?" "No." Marcus looked at the crooked worker's gate. "I've already been assigned an entrance." At 11:15, the atmosphere near the main house changed completely. Luxury vehicles lined the circular drive. Bank representatives arrived from Dallas. 2 private investors came from Houston. Lawyers carried leather cases through the front doors. Ranch supervisors had exchanged dusty shirts for clean ones. Coffee, pastries, and crystal water pitchers had been arranged in the large conference room. Wade Cooper stood near the head of the table, wearing a dark jacket over his Western shirt. His wife had told him the jacket made him look like an owner. For years, Wade had imagined this moment. Harold was old. The ranch was changing hands. Everyone expected layoffs, restructuring, and outside management. But Wade believed he was indispensable. He knew the land. He knew the crews. He knew the suppliers. He knew which records existed and which had disappeared. No new owner could operate Braddock Ranch without him. The investors would recognize that. Perhaps he would be named general manager. Perhaps he would finally receive the title he believed should have been his years ago. A supervisor approached quietly. "That man's still at the east gate." Wade frowned. "Who?" "The one from this morning." Wade shook his head. "Security can deal with him after the meeting." He came back onto the property. "How?" "Drove along the service road." Wade looked toward the windows, then remove him. Elaine Porter arrived with him. Wade's expression shifted. He knew Elaine's name. Everyone in senior management did. She represented the purchasing group. Why would she be with him? No idea. Wade looked across the room. Harold Braddock had entered through a side door. He appeared smaller than usual. His silver hair was neatly combed, but his skin looked pale. One hand trembled slightly against his cane. Wade immediately moved toward him. "Harold, you should have told me you were coming early." Harold looked past him. "Where is Marcus?" Wade's body stiffened. "Marcus?" "Marcus Bennett." For a second, Wade heard the name without understanding it. Then the memory returned. The old truck. The calm face. "What's your name?" "Marcus Bennett." Wade felt something cold pass through his chest. He forced a smile. "Is he one of the consultants?" Harold looked directly at him. "No." Before Wade could ask more, Elaine entered the conference room. Behind her came Marcus. He wore the same denim shirt, the same dusty boots, the same dark hat, now held in one hand. The cardboard box rested beneath his other arm. Conversations stopped one by one. The guard from the front gate stood near the door. His face lost all color. Jacob, Rosa, Curtis, and several senior employees had been invited to observe the announcement from the back of the room. Jacob stared at Marcus. Then he looked toward Wade. Wade did not move. Harold Braddock walked slowly to the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming." His voice was weaker than usual, but it carried through the room. "As most of you know, my family has owned this ranch for more than a century." He paused to breathe. "My grandfather purchased the first 600 acres in 1912. My father expanded it. I spent most of my life trying to preserve it." He looked around the room. But land does not belong to a family because its name sits above the gate. It belongs to those willing to protect it, work it, and leave it stronger than they found it. Wade's mouth had gone dry. Harold extended one hand toward Marcus. "This is Marcus Bennett." Nobody spoke. As of 8 o'clock yesterday morning, Mr. Bennett became the sole owner of Braddock Ranch, its livestock operations, its water rights, its equipment, and every acre held by the Braddock Family Trust. The silence was absolute. Wade looked toward the floor. The guard near the door swallowed hard. One of the investors smiled politely, unaware of what had happened that morning. Jacob's eyes widened. Marcus stepped beside Harold. He set the cardboard box on the table. For several seconds, he said nothing. He looked at every face in the room. Some were curious, some nervous, some eager to impress him, and several terrified. Marcus began quietly. "When my father first came to this ranch, he was 19 years old." Harold looked toward him. Even he had not expected those words. His name was Elijah Bennett. He entered through the east gate because he was told the main gate was not for workers like him. Marcus opened the box and removed the old photograph. It showed a young black cowboy standing beside a horse. His shirt was dusty, his smile uncertain, and the Braddock barn rose behind him. Marcus placed the photograph on the table. "He worked here for 7 years." Wade glanced toward Harold. Harold stared at the picture. "I remember him," the old man whispered. Marcus turned. "You knew my father?" Harold slowly nodded. "He was the best horseman we had." Marcus's face tightened. "My father said the same thing." A faint smile passed between them. Then Marcus looked toward the room again. "He also said he was never allowed to enter the main house." Harold's eyes lowered. "He said he trained men who were later promoted over him. He said he repaired roofs he wasn't allowed to sleep beneath. He said he loved this land, even when some of the people on it gave him every reason not to." No one moved. Wade's heart pounded. Marcus continued. "I arrived early today because I wanted to see the ranch without a presentation, without executives walking beside me, without anyone changing their behavior because they knew who I was." He looked toward the front gate guard. "I was told deliveries use the east entrance." The young man lowered his head. "I explained that I had a meeting with Mr. Braddock." Marcus turned toward Wade. "Then the man who told me he ran this ranch asked whether I was looking for day work." Every eye moved toward Wade. Wade forced himself to speak. "It was a misunderstanding." Marcus did not answer immediately. Wade continued. "You weren't on the gate list. Nobody had been told your identity." "That's true? I was protecting the property?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Protecting it from what?" Wade opened his mouth. No answer came. "From an old truck?" Wade's face reddened. "From an unidentified visitor." "An unidentified visitor who repeatedly asked you to call Harold Braddock. You came hours before the meeting. And that made me dangerous?" "I never said that." "No, you told me to know my place." The room became even quieter. Wade looked around. "I meant that he needed to follow ranch procedures." Marcus's voice remained calm. "The procedure was to send me to the workers' gate without making one phone call." Wade shifted his stance. "I regret how it sounded." Marcus looked toward Jacob. "That young man believed I deserved enough respect to be escorted to the office." Jacob straightened. "Wade threatened to fire him." "I didn't threaten to fire anyone." Jacob spoke from the back. "You said I'd get my third write-up." Wade turned sharply. "This is not your meeting." Marcus's voice changed. It did not become louder. It became colder. It is now. Wade faced him again. Marcus walked slowly around the table. I could dismiss you for what happened this morning. Wade's jaw tightened. But I won't. Several people looked surprised. Wade's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then Elaine placed the audit folder on the table. Marcus continued. Because what happened at the gate is not the most serious reason you may lose your position. Wade's relief vanished. Elaine opened the folder. Marcus removed several pages. In the last 3 years, Braddock Ranch paid more than $4 million to Cooper Agricultural Services. Wade's face became still. Legitimate feed contracts. Owned by your brother. He gave the best price. 22% above regional averages. Transportation costs increased. Marcus turned another page. 3 maintenance vendors share the same mailing address. Wade said nothing. One is registered to your nephew, another to your wife's cousin. The third was dissolved 2 years ago, but continued receiving payments. The investors began exchanging looks. Harold gripped the head of his cane. Wade? Wade looked toward him. Harold, accounting approved every invoice. Accounting approved documents you submitted, Elaine said. Wade turned on her. You don't understand ranch expenses. Elaine remained expressionless. I understand shell companies. Marcus placed another document beside the first. 312 cattle appear in transportation logs, but not in final sales records. That happens. Counts change. Not by 312. Storm losses, illness, theft. Marcus nodded. We agree about theft. Wade's face darkened. Are you accusing me? I'm describing the records? Wade laughed once, loudly and without humor. This is unbelievable. I gave 28 years to this place. Harold looked at him with pain rather than anger. Did you steal from me? Wade stared at the old man. No. Then explain the cattle. I can explain everything. Good, Marcus said. You'll have the opportunity. 2 men entered through the conference room doors. They wore plain clothes, but both displayed badges. Wade stepped backward. One was a special ranger from the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association. The other was an investigator from the county sheriff's office. Elaine had contacted them after the preliminary audit. Marcus had not expected them to act that morning. But while he sat at the workers' gate, Elaine had sent photographs of the records and confirmed that livestock theft might still be occurring. The special ranger addressed Wade. Mr. Cooper, we need to speak with you regarding discrepancies in livestock ownership and transport documentation. Wade's face turned pale. He looked toward the supervisors. Neither met his eyes. This is a setup. Marcus shook his head. No, the audit began 6 weeks ago. You came here pretending to be nobody. I came here without telling you I was somebody. That's the same thing. No. Marcus stepped closer. You decided I was nobody. The words landed harder than a shout. Wade looked around the room for an ally. Harold had turned away. The investors watched in silence. The workers at the back stood motionless. Only Jacob met Wade's eyes. Not with satisfaction, with disappointment. Wade pointed toward Marcus. You think buying a deed makes you a rancher? Marcus did not react. You think these people will follow you because you walked in here with lawyers? I don't need them to follow my money. Marcus glanced toward the workers. I intend to earn their trust. Wade laughed bitterly. You won't last a year. Perhaps. This ranch will bury you. Perhaps. You don't know the land. Marcus looked toward the photograph of his father. My family knew it before you did. Wade's expression twisted. The investigator stepped toward him. Mr. Cooper. Wade removed the ranch keys from his belt and threw them onto the table. They struck the wood with a sharp metallic sound. Then he walked toward the doors between the two investigators. As he passed Jacob, he stopped. You think this man's going to save you? Jacob said nothing. Wade leaned closer. You'll still be cleaning stalls when he forgets your name. Marcus heard him. His name is Jacob Reed. Wade turned. Marcus continued. His sister has epilepsy. He has 2 disciplinary write-ups, one for protecting an injured horse and one for leaving work when his sister was taken to a hospital. Jacob stared at him. Marcus had remembered every detail. Wade looked from Marcus to Jacob. Then the investigators escorted him out. For several moments after the doors closed, no one spoke. Harold lowered himself into a chair. He appeared to have aged years in minutes. I trusted him. Marcus looked at him. I know. I should have seen it. You saw the part he wanted you to see. Harold stared at the photograph of Elijah. My father ran this ranch when your father worked here. Yes. He wasn't a kind man. Marcus said nothing. Harold's voice weakened. I told myself I was different. Marcus pulled out the chair beside him. Maybe you were. Not different enough. The admission seemed to cost him something. Harold looked toward the workers in the back. I let Wade control everything because I was tired. Because I was sick. Because I thought loyalty meant competence. Marcus sat beside him. Loyalty without oversight becomes permission. Harold nodded slowly. He looked at Marcus. What will you do? Marcus turned toward the room. The bankers expected a financial plan. The investors expected restructuring. The supervisors expected dismissals. The workers expected promises. Marcus gave them none. First, we find the truth. He looked toward Elaine. Freeze all discretionary payments connected to management. Secure payroll, livestock, procurement, and maintenance records. Elaine nodded. Already in progress. Marcus addressed the supervisors. No records leave this property. No computers are removed. No documents are destroyed. One supervisor raised a nervous hand. What happens to operations? They continue. Who's running the crews? Marcus looked toward Harold. Who do you trust? Harold thought for several seconds. Samuel Ortiz. A man in his early 60s stood near the back wall, had worked at Braddock Ranch for 34 years. Wade had passed him over for promotion at least 4 times. Samuel looked startled. Harold gestured toward him. Come here. Samuel removed his hat and approached. Harold studied his face. I owe you an apology. Samuel looked uncomfortable. You don't owe me anything, sir. Yes, I do. Harold turned to Marcus. Samuel knows every section of this ranch. He knows cattle, water, pasture rotation, and crews. Wade said he wasn't management material. Marcus looked toward Samuel. What did that mean? Samuel's expression was careful. It meant Wade didn't like hearing no. Marcus almost smiled. Can you keep operations running for 72 hours? Samuel looked toward the supervisors, then toward the workers. Yes. You're acting operations chief until we complete the initial review. Samuel stared at him. Sir, can you do it? Yes. Then do it. A subtle change moved through the room. Not applause, not celebration. Something quieter. Men and women who had spent years avoiding Wade's attention slowly lifted their heads. Marcus then looked toward Jacob. Young man. Jacob stepped forward. Yes, sir. Dr. Lawson needs someone to assist with the horses today. Jacob glanced toward the crew supervisor. Marcus noticed. You don't need permission from him. Jacob looked back. Yes, sir. And bring me copies of your disciplinary notices. Jacob nodded. Marcus addressed everyone. No one is being promoted permanently today. No one is being rewarded because they were nice to the new owner. And no one is being punished because they failed to recognize me. The front gate guard looked up with surprise. Marcus continued. But every policy, every deduction, every disciplinary action, and every safety complaint will be reviewed. Rosa crossed her arms, listening closely. Any employee who has been threatened, cheated, harassed, or pressured into silence will be able to speak to an independent team beginning tomorrow. One of the supervisors frowned. That could create chaos. Marcus looked at him. If people telling the truth creates chaos, the chaos was already here. No one challenged him again. The meeting ended nearly 2 hours later. The investors left with fewer answers than they had expected. The bankers left with additional documents. The supervisors returned to their departments, unsure whether they would still have jobs by the end of the week. Harold remained seated. The room had emptied except for Marcus and Elaine. Outside, sunlight moved across the broad fields. Harold stared through the window. When did your father die? 8 years ago. Did he know you were trying to buy the ranch? No. Marcus looked toward the photograph. I didn't know I would. Harold nodded. Why did you? Marcus took time before answering. My company needed land for agricultural expansion. That's the business answer. Yes. What's the real one? Marcus leaned back. The first time I visited, I recognized the horse barn from my father's photograph. Harold listened. I stood outside it for almost an hour. I thought about everything he endured here, and everything he loved here. Marcus's voice softened. He spent his life believing he would never own a piece of the land he worked. By the time I had enough money to change that, he was gone. Harold looked down. So you bought the whole ranch? Marcus gave a faint smile. It seemed simpler. Harold laughed once. The sound became a cough. Marcus stood quickly, but Harold raised one hand. I'm all right. No, you're not. Harold's breathing steadied after several seconds. He looked old and tired. The doctors gave me 6 months. Marcus said nothing. That was 4 months ago. Why didn't you tell me? I needed the sale completed. It would have been. I needed to know the ranch would survive me. Harold looked toward the photograph again. Maybe this land has been waiting for your family longer than either of us understood. Marcus placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. It's still your home. Harold looked at him. The house? The house, your staff, your horses. As long as you want. That wasn't part of the contract. It is now. Harold's eyes glistened. He turned toward the window before Marcus could see too much. That afternoon, Marcus walked the ranch with Samuel Ortiz. Samuel spoke little at first. Men who had survived decades under Wade had learned that openness could be expensive. But Marcus asked practical questions. Where did flooding occur? Which wells were failing? Which crews worked best together? Which supervisors were respected? Which buildings were dangerous? Samuel answered carefully. By the time they reached the northern cattle pens, his caution had begun to fade. That loading chute should have been replaced 2 years ago. Why wasn't it? Wade said the budget was frozen. Marcus looked at the warped metal. Was it? Samuel gave him a long look. I suppose you know the answer now. Marcus examined the chute. A fresh weld covered one cracked section. Who repaired this? Curtis. With approval? No. Why? Because cattle were going through the next morning. Marcus nodded. Add him to tomorrow's safety meeting. Samuel looked surprised. You're having a safety meeting? At 6. In the morning? That's when the crews start. Samuel studied Marcus. You're coming? I called it. They continued walking. Near the west pasture, they found a group of workers repairing fence. Jacob was among them. He had already helped Dr. Lawson treat Rosie. The mare would recover, but another day without treatment might have resulted in permanent damage. When Jacob saw Marcus, he removed his gloves. How is she? Marcus asked. Better. Dr. Lawson cleaned the wound and started antibiotics. Good. Jacob handed him 2 folded papers. My write-ups. Marcus read them. The first accused Jacob of insubordination for refusing an assigned task. The task was riding a horse with a visibly swollen hoof. The second accused him of job abandonment. There was no mention of his sister's medical emergency. Marcus returned the papers. Who signed these? Wade. Anyone else present? Mr. Dalton for the first. Cruz saw the second. Marcus looked toward Samuel. Suspend both notices pending review. Samuel nodded. Jacob's eyes widened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Marcus looked at the fencing tools. Were you assigned to the horse barn today? Yes, sir. Then why are you here? Jacob's face fell. Supervisor moved me after Dr. Lawson left. Marcus turned toward the crew supervisor, Dalton, who stood several yards away. Why? Dalton swallowed. Short-handed. Who instructed you to move him? No one. Was it because he spoke during the meeting? No, sir. Marcus waited. Dalton shifted his weight. I thought it was better to separate him from the situation. What situation? Dalton had no answer. Marcus stepped closer. Retaliation does not always look like termination. Sometimes it looks like the worst shift, the hardest assignment, fewer hours, sudden discipline, isolation. Dalton lowered his eyes. If anyone who spoke today experiences retaliation, the person responsible will be dismissed. Yes, sir. Send Jacob back to the horse barn. Dalton nodded quickly. As Marcus and Samuel walked away, Jacob called out, Mr. Bennett. Marcus turned. My sister's name is Lily. Marcus nodded. I'll remember. That evening, Marcus sat alone on the porch of a small guest cabin near the southern pasture. He had refused the master's suite in the ranch house. Harold needed quiet. Marcus preferred the cabin anyway. The old Ford was parked beneath a tree. His father's photograph rested on the table beside him. Across the pasture, cattle moved like dark shapes beneath the fading sky. The ranch was peaceful from a distance, but Marcus knew peace and silence were not the same thing. His phone rang. Elaine, we found something. Marcus sat straighter. What? Wade wasn't acting alone. Who? We're still tracing authorizations. But someone inside finance altered livestock records after transport. Current employee? Yes. Senior? Yes. Marcus looked toward the ranch house. Name? Charles Vance. Marcus knew it immediately. Chief Financial Officer of Braddock Operations. Charles had sat across from him during the meeting. He had expressed shock at the missing cattle. He had asked whether operations could continue. He had shaken Marcus's hand before leaving. Where is he? Supposedly at his home in Dallas. Supposedly. His assistant says he left the ranch at 1:30. His company phone is off. Marcus stood. Freeze access. Already done. Notify investigators. They're looking for him. Marcus stared into the darkening pasture. How much? We don't know. Possibly several million. The sale of stolen cattle was not the whole operation. False maintenance vendors, inflated feed contracts, payroll deductions. Braddock Ranch had not been poorly managed. It had been harvested, bit by bit, year by year, by men who assumed Harold was too sick, too old, and too trusting to notice. Elaine continued. There's something else. The account connected to the missing cattle received a transfer this morning. Before the meeting. 40 minutes before. Someone knew the audit was closing in. Yes. Marcus remembered Wade's reaction. Surprise, fear. But perhaps not surprise about the investigation. Maybe surprise that Marcus had arrived early. Wade was expecting a new owner, Marcus said. He may have planned to control whoever arrived. Or scare him away from looking too closely. Marcus looked toward the distant equipment sheds. Search every facility connected to cattle transfer. The investigators need legal grounds. I own the facilities. That gives us access, not authority to seize personal property. Then we inspect our property. Elaine paused. I'll arrange it. At 6 the next morning, more than 100 workers gathered outside the main equipment barn. Some had heard about Wade's removal. Some knew about the missing cattle. Everyone knew the new owner had arrived in an old truck and been sent through the workers' gate. The story had already changed in each retelling. Some said security had handcuffed him. Some said Wade had called him a slur. Some said Marcus had purchased the ranch as revenge for his father. Marcus corrected none of it yet. He stood on the concrete, loading platform beside Samuel, Elaine, Dr. Lawson, and a safety consultant from Fort Worth. No stage, no microphone, no executives behind him. Marcus waited until the workers became quiet. My name is Marcus Bennett. Several people smiled faintly. Most of you know that by now. A small ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Marcus continued. I'm not here this morning to give you a speech about family. The laughter disappeared. Companies use that word when they want loyalty, without accountability. Families can also mistreat people. Rosa nodded from the crowd. This is a workplace. You deserve clear wages, safe equipment, honest rules, and respect. Marcus pointed toward tables set up beside the barn. Every employee will receive a written explanation of pay, housing charges, equipment fees, and disciplinary procedures. He looked across the faces. Any unauthorized deductions identified during the review will be repaid. Murmurs spread. A worker raised one hand. What happens if we complain and our supervisor cuts our hours? You report it directly to the independent review team. And if nothing happens? Marcus looked at him. Then you come to me. The worker gave a skeptical smile. How? Marcus held up a small card. My office number will be posted in every work building. A supervisor near the front looked uncomfortable. Marcus noticed. This does not mean every complaint will be proven. It means every complaint will be heard. He gestured toward the broken tractor behind the barn. Operations will pause in sections where equipment is unsafe. A foreman called out. We'll miss shipping targets. Then we miss them. That costs money. Marcus nodded. So does a funeral. No one argued. Lawson spoke next about animal care. The safety consultant explained inspections. Samuel assigned temporary supervisors. For the first time in years, workers asked questions without first looking over their shoulders for Wade. After the meeting, Curtis approached Marcus. You really shutting down the north loading chute? Yes. We have 80 head scheduled tomorrow. Move them through the west chute. Adds 3 hours. Then it adds 3 hours. Curtis smiled. Wade would have told us to weld another plate on it. Wade is not here. Curtis looked toward the ground. No, sir. The words carried relief. By the third day, the review team had collected more than 200 reports. Some were minor. A supervisor who shouted too much. A schedule changed without warning. An incorrect housing charge. Others were not minor. Women in the kitchen described harassment. Migrant workers described threats involving immigration status. Ranch hands described unpaid overtime. Mechanics produced photographs of damaged brakes and cracked hydraulic lines. One worker, Luis Martinez, brought a notebook containing cattle identification numbers. He had kept records privately for almost 4 years. Why? Marcus asked. Luis sat across from him inside the administration office. Because numbers disappeared. Who told you to change them? Mr. Cooper. Directly? Sometimes. Other times, Mr. Vance sent revised sheets? Why didn't you report it? Luis looked at him as though the answer should be obvious. To who? Marcus had no response. Luis continued. Wade ran the ranch. Vance controlled the money. Mr. Braddock was sick. Sheriff played cards with Wade every Thursday. Marcus leaned back. Were all the missing cattle sold? Luis shook his head. Some were moved. Where? Old Miller property. Samuel, standing near the door, frowned. That lease ended 6 years ago. Luis nodded. Trucks still go there. Whose trucks? Cooper Agricultural. Marcus and Elaine exchanged a look. The Old Miller property lay 17 miles northwest of the ranch. Braddock had once leased its holding pens, but no longer used them. Investigators obtained a warrant that afternoon. They found 76 cattle carrying altered tags. They also found equipment purchased with Braddock funds, crates of veterinary supplies, forged transport documents, and a locked office containing financial records. Wade Cooper was arrested before sunset. Charles Vance was found the next morning attempting to cross into Mexico near Laredo. The investigation spread beyond the ranch. 2 suppliers were charged. A transportation broker agreed to cooperate. The county sheriff denied knowledge of the scheme, though photographs later showed him at private hunting trips paid for by Wade. The story reached local news. Marcus avoided interviews. He did not want the ranch known only for scandal. But the workers already understood the significance. For years, they had been told Wade was untouchable. Within 1 week of Marcus Bennett's arrival, Wade was sitting in a county jail. Justice, however, was not as simple as removing one man. Without Wade, the ranch struggled. Schedules had existed only in his head. Supplier relationships collapsed. Some supervisors resigned before they could be investigated. Several crews lacked experienced leaders. Cattle shipments were delayed. Costs increased sharply. Investors began calling. One advised Marcus to sell part of the property. Another recommended replacing local workers with a national management company. Elaine presented the numbers during an evening meeting. At this rate, the ranch will lose $6 million this quarter. Marcus looked through the financial projections. How much did Wade's theft cost annually? Between $2 and $4 million. How much did deferred maintenance hide? Possibly another $5. So the ranch was already losing money. It was disguising the losses. Marcus closed the folder. Then we're not destroying a profitable operation? No. We're exposing an unprofitable lie. Elaine nodded. But the cash loss is real. So is the, land. Investors may not be patient. Marcus looked toward her. They bought into my holding company. They didn't buy my judgment. Elaine smiled faintly. That sounds expensive. It usually is. Marcus invested additional capital. He replaced damaged equipment. He renegotiated feed contracts. He brought in outside accountants. But he refused to replace the workforce with a corporate management team. Instead, he formed an operations council. Samuel led cattle management. Curtis oversaw maintenance. Rosa managed food services and reviewed all supplier deliveries. Dr. Lawson established animal care protocols. A former payroll clerk named Denise Howard was promoted after she revealed she had repeatedly questioned unauthorized deductions. Jacob became assistant coordinator for horse operations. Not because he had handed Marcus water, not because he had defended him, but because Dr. Lawson reported that Jacob understood horses better than employees twice his age. When Marcus offered him the role, Jacob hesitated. I don't have management experience. Neither did Wade when someone first promoted him. I'm 25. You'll report to people who know more than you. Jacob looked uncertain. What happens if I make a mistake? You correct it. And if I fail? Then you learn whether you failed from lack of skill or lack of support. Marcus placed the role description on the desk. This is a 90-day trial, not a reward. Work for it. Jacob accepted. 3 weeks after the acquisition, Lily Reed suffered another seizure. Jacob was in the horse barn when the school called. His face changed the instant he saw the number. The old fear returned. The fear of choosing between work and family. Marcus happened to be inspecting new stall flooring nearby. Go, he said. Jacob looked toward him. I need someone to cover. I'll find someone. It might take all afternoon. Then it takes all afternoon. Jacob hesitated. Marcus stepped closer. Your sister should never have to wonder whether a horse mattered more than she did. Jacob's eyes filled, though he quickly looked away. Thank you. He left. Marcus watched the truck disappear down the road. Damars, Lawson stood beside him. You know you can't personally solve every employee's life. I know. Do you? Marcus looked toward her. No. Emily smiled. At least you're honest. By the second month, Braddock Ranch began to change visibly. The workers' gate was repaired. The bunkhouses received new roofs. Unsafe vehicles were removed. Wage deductions were refunded. A memorial scholarship was created for the children of ranch employees. Marcus named it after Elijah Bennett. When Harold heard, he asked Marcus to drive him to the old horse barn. The cancer had weakened him quickly. He now used a wheelchair most days. Marcus pushed him along the center aisle, while afternoon light passed through the wooden slats. Rosie stood in a stall, fully recovered. Harold watched her. "Your father saved a horse in this barn." Marcus looked at him. "What?" "Winter of '76. Ice storm. Horse panicked and broke through a stall." Harold's voice was faint. 3 men couldn't get near her. Elijah walked in alone. Marcus stared toward the stalls. "He never told me." He calmed her, wrapped the leg, stayed all night. Harold smiled sadly. "My father praised the supervisor the next morning." Marcus looked down. "Not Elijah?" "No." "Did you say anything?" Harold's eyes closed briefly. "I was 29. I knew it was wrong. But knowing is the cheapest form of courage." The words remained between them. Harold reached into his coat and removed a small brass key. "What is that?" Marcus asked. "The old records room. I have the keys." "Not this one." Harold pointed toward a narrow door at the back of the barn. Behind it was a small office that had not been used in decades. The lock resisted before opening. Dust covered everything. Shelves leaned beneath ledgers, photographs, payroll books, veterinary notes, and employee records. Harold pointed toward a cabinet. "Your father's file may still be here." Marcus opened the drawers. Names appeared in alphabetical order, handwritten on aging folders. Bennett, Elijah. His hand stopped. He removed the file. Inside were timesheets, work assignments, medical notes, and supervisor evaluations. Marcus read silently. "Reliable, excellent with horses, strong work ethic, reserved, not suitable for leadership." The same phrase appeared 3 times. Not suitable for leadership. No explanation, no incident, no poor performance. Only a judgment repeated until it became official truth. Then Marcus found a letter folded behind the final evaluation. It was written by Elijah. "Mr. Braddock, I am requesting consideration for assistant barn supervisor. I have worked here 6 years and trained 4 men currently assigned above me. I believe my work speaks for itself. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking for the same opportunity." The letter had never been answered. Marcus read it twice. Harold watched him. "My father kept everything." Marcus folded the letter carefully. "My father kept nothing." "He probably wanted to forget." "No." Marcus looked toward the old records. "He wanted us to believe he had been treated better than he was." Harold's eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry." Marcus breathed deeply. He had imagined this ranch as a place from his father's stories, but reading the letter made the injustice tangible. Elijah had asked politely, worked faithfully, waited patiently, and been ignored. Marcus placed the letter beside the photograph in the cardboard box. Then he turned toward Harold. "I'm changing the ranch name." Harold's face shifted. Marcus continued. "Not completely." Several months later, workers gathered beneath the main iron gate. The Braddock Ranch sign had been removed. In its place, covered by a canvas sheet, hung a new metal arch. Harold sat in his wheelchair beside Marcus. Jacob stood with Lily near the horse crews. Samuel, Rosa, Curtis, Denise, Luis, and hundreds of employees filled the road. Local reporters waited behind a fence. Marcus stepped forward. He did not give a long speech. This land has carried more stories than any one family name can hold. He looked toward Harold. The Braddock family built this ranch. Then toward the photograph of Elijah displayed on a wooden stand. Men and women whose names never appeared above the gate sustained it. Marcus took hold of the canvas rope. Harold placed his hand over Marcus's. Together, they pulled. The canvas fell. The new sign read, Braddock Bennett Ranch. Beneath it, smaller words had been welded into the iron. One land, one gate. The workers applauded. Marcus looked toward the East Service Road. That morning, the old workers' entrance had been permanently closed. Not because workers were unwelcome, because every employee would now use the same main gate. Livestock and delivery trucks still had separate access for safety. But people, all people, entered beneath the same sign. Harold stared upward. Elijah would have liked that. Marcus looked at him. He would have said it took too long. Harold smiled. He would have been right. The applause continued as the first line of workers walked beneath the new arch. Some removed their hats. Others touched the iron. Jacob pushed Lily's wheelchair along the road. Her epilepsy had become harder to manage. But the ranch's new health plan helped cover the specialist her family could never previously afford. She looked toward Marcus. My brother says you bought all this. Marcus smiled. That's what the paperwork says. Why? He glanced across the land. Because sometimes, the only way to fix a gate is to own the fence. Lily considered that answer. Then she nodded as though it made perfect sense. Harold died 6 weeks later. He passed quietly in the master bedroom, overlooking the southern pasture. Marcus was with him. So was Harold's niece, Claire, who had returned from California after years away. In his final hours, Harold asked Marcus to open the window. The sound of cattle drifted into the room. So much noise, Harold whispered. Marcus smiled. You spent your life around cattle. I know. Harold closed his eyes. I'd miss it. A long silence followed. Then Harold spoke again. Don't let them make you hard. Marcus looked at him. Who? People who think kindness is weakness. Marcus said nothing. Harold opened his eyes one last time. Your father deserved better. Marcus took his hand. So did you. Harold gave the faintest smile. Then his breathing slowed and stopped. The funeral was held beneath the oak trees near the family cemetery. Workers stood beside investors, ranch hands beside bankers, people who had known Harold for 50 years beside people he had barely noticed. Marcus delivered no speech. Instead, he read a short line from Harold's handwritten instructions. A ranch is not measured by how much land one man controls, but by how many lives are strengthened by the way he controls it. After the funeral, Marcus walked alone to the horse barn. The sun was low. Dust floated in golden light. Rosie stood quietly in her stall. Marcus removed Elijah's letter from his coat. He had read it dozens of times. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking for the same opportunity. Marcus placed the letter inside a glass frame mounted beside the barn office. Below it, a brass plate read, Elijah Bennett, horseman, father, leader. Footsteps sounded behind him. Jacob entered carrying a saddle. He looked at the frame. Your father? Yes. He worked here? Long before either of us. Jacob read the letter. He should have gotten the job. Marcus nodded. Yes. Jacob leaned the saddle against the wall. Do you think things really change? Marcus looked toward the barn doors. Workers moved outside. Men and women entered through the same road. Supervisors checked new safety equipment. A veterinarian treated animals without waiting for permission from someone protecting a bonus. Payroll records were posted clearly. Complaints still happened. Mistakes still happened. People still carried prejudice, ambition, fear, and selfishness. Owning the ranch had not transformed human nature. It had only created an opportunity to demand better from it. Things change when people make them change, Marcus said. Jacob nodded. Then he looked toward the old Ford outside. You ever going to buy a new truck? Marcus followed his gaze. The Ford had become famous locally. Employees joked that the ranch's most valuable vehicle was the one least likely to pass inspection. Marcus smiled. It still runs. Barely. Your opinion has been noted. Jacob laughed. As he turned to leave, Marcus called after him. Jacob. Yes, sir? Samuel says the horse program needs a permanent manager. Jacob stood still. Marcus continued. He recommended you. Jacob's eyes widened. I've only been assistant for 4 months. You've improved care schedules, reduced injuries, and trained 3 new employees. I had help. Good managers usually do. Jacob looked toward Elijah's letter. Are you sure? Marcus walked closer. No. Jacob blinked. Marcus smiled faintly. But someone once decided my father wasn't suitable for leadership without giving him the opportunity to prove otherwise. He placed one hand on Jacob's shoulder. I won't make that mistake in either direction. The position is yours for 6 months. Earn it permanently. Jacob's face changed slowly. Pride, fear, gratitude, determination. I will. I know. Jacob walked out of the barn. Marcus remained beside his father's letter. A year after the day he arrived at the ranch, Marcus drove the old Ford down the main road again. The blue paint was still faded. The bumpers still leaned. But the engine had been rebuilt by Curtis, who had refused payment and claimed it was a matter of professional honor. As Marcus approached the gate, a new guard stepped from the booth. She smiled. Morning, Mr. Bennett? Morning. Behind her, the words, One Land. One gate shone beneath the ranch name. A delivery truck waited in the commercial lane. Workers entered through the main road. A group of new employees stood beside the administration building for orientation. One of them was a black teenager wearing borrowed boots and an oversized shirt. He looked nervous. Marcus recognized that expression. The expression of someone entering, a place where he did not yet know whether he would be respected. Marcus parked. He approached the group. The orientation supervisor started to introduce him, but Marcus raised one hand. He walked directly toward the young man. What's your name? Darius, sir. You worked cattle before? A little. My uncle has 20 head. What do you want to learn? Darius looked toward the barns. Horses. Marcus nodded toward Jacob, now walking from the horse complex. That man runs the program. Darius looked surprised. He looks young. He is. Is he good? Marcus smiled. He earned it. Jacob approached and shook the young man's hand. No one told Darius to use another entrance. No one laughed at his boots. No one decided what he could become before watching him work. Marcus returned to the Ford. Before climbing inside, he looked across the ranch. The land had not changed. The same grass moved beneath the Texas wind. The same cattle filled the pastures. The same barns stood beneath the wide sky. But the ranch was no longer controlled by fear. It was not perfect. It never would be. Justice was not a single meeting, not a dramatic reveal. not a corrupt man being led away. Justice was payroll corrected month after month. Equipment repaired before someone was hurt. A sick child placed above a work schedule. A young employee given a chance. An old wrong remembered instead of hidden. And a gate opened for everyone. Marcus placed his father's gloves on the passenger seat. Then he started the engine. As he drove toward the northern pasture, the new metal sign disappeared slowly in the rearview mirror. For a moment, Marcus imagined his father beside him, Elijah Bennett, 19 years old, entering Braddock Ranch through a narrow service gate because someone had decided the main road was not meant for him. Marcus rested one hand on the steering wheel. "You made it through the front gate, Dad," he whispered. The old Ford continued across the land his father had once worked, the land his son now owned. And beneath the open Texas sky, every road ahead belonged to them.